I don't know how you do it, Peter King. I don't know how you do it on deadline. I don't know how you pop all that stuff out like that. It's amazing. And you're back at your keyboard, back on the Rich Eisen show. How are you, Peter?
Hey, Rich. Well, when you've done something like that for 20 years, you kind of get the hang of it. I might say the same thing about you and all the wickets that you occupy every week. So I was really happy that you wrote that. In part, I mean, I don't know if anybody out here recalls precisely how you did that column. They should, but what was really cool about it is that you took us into the meeting that Al Riveron had with all of the NFL Network family and NFL.com family in California a few weeks ago. And I thought it was really, really interesting because I think you raised a question that is at the heart of the pass interference dilemma as we move into at least a one-year period, because I'm not sure it's going to last any longer than 1 year, honestly. We are going to have a one-year experimental period where pass interference, both called and non-called, for the first 28 minutes of each half is going to be eligible for coaches' challenges. And as you wrote very, very well and insightfully, that when Riveron would put up plays on the big screen, that some people in the room thought, yeah, interference. No, it wasn't interference. So that's what is going to have to be determined when they go to replay review.
Well, the issue, Peter, is that there's always the, if you will, unintended consequence. The intention for this rule was to create a safety net that will prevent the NFC Championship game from ever happening again, and I totally agreed with that, and I think it's necessary to weave that safety net after what we saw last year. But the unintended consequence is just like anything else that's reviewable. Once the review process starts, anything that is allowed to be reviewed is, in fact, reviewed, in the process. So that means every time, that you're looking for offensive pass interference because a booth has buzzed in or a flag has been thrown for it, defensive pass interference is now going to be looked at as well, and vice versa. And I'm thinking that might be the tweak here, Peter, is that understanding that every time you open up replay, everything that's reviewable can be reviewed. Maybe we exempt pass interference from that category. Otherwise, you might get offsetting penalties every damn time, and it's going to be really upsetting and confusing to a lot of fans.
Look, I asked Al Riveron directly, Rich, are you worried about a spate of offsetting penalties?
Right.
Because essentially, I think if you examine replay, and listen, Rich, over the weekend, I'm just telling you, this was what, because I asked a bunch of people, what are the things you're worried about with this? And listen to the response of one coach. He said, listen, I want to raise this point that we've been talking about. And that is that what happens when away from the play, maybe not all the way across the field, but what happens if in the slot, after a winning touchdown is scored right at the end of a game, and they even go to booth review, okay, what happens if the slot receiver, let's see, the tight end is in the slot, okay, and he pushes off the safety, clearly pushes off when the ball is in the air. But it had nothing to do with the play. What are they going to do? And, that is going to be a big, big test. Because if you are going to call pass interference by the letter of the law, you're supposed to call pass interference even if it is not with the two guys where the ball is intended for. So that's going to be another issue here.
Yeah, I think that this may be something similar, Peter, to, if you remember a couple of years ago, that the way that in the first year after Dean Blandino had left and Al Riveron, the new still head of NFL refs, came in, that replay looked at whether it was catch, not a catch, in a way that was different than the way Blandino would call it. Like, basically, they're going to stay with the ruling on the field 99 out of 100 times, but instead they started Zapruder filming this thing was the ball moving a little bit. Let's be totally literal about it. Let's parse it out. And if you remember, Kelvin Benjamin had a touchdown in New England for the Bills called back.
That was the worst call in the history of replay.
Right, and then they changed. They basically changed the way that they reviewed it for the playoffs, and that came into being for a touchdown for the Eagles. Where Clement caught one, we're kind of juggling it a little bit in the end zone. And obviously the Zach Ertz plays too. That they definitely changed the way they reviewed it. Maybe, and they did the same thing with roughing the passer last year. Maybe they have a similar epiphany midseason this year, even though it's not the best idea to go about it that way.
Look, Rich, that's what happens. You saw what happened. You saw what happened last year when during the preseason. And I forget the numbers on this, but there was, I bet there were 50 or 60, leading with the crown of the helmet.
Right.
Calls made. And we all thought, everybody's hands were ringing from coast to coast, that how can you play football like this, blah, blah, blah. And the season started, and they never called it.
That's right.
They cried wolf. The officiating department cried wolf on that last year. I asked Riveron about that too, and he said, no. Players learned, and they were good. And there's no question that players were better. But by the letter of the law, they missed 50 of those calls last year, and all of which were called in the preseason. So, again, I have no idea how this is going to be called, but this just strikes me. Rich, let's fast forward to the league meetings in Florida late next March. And I don't know where they'll be, Orlando, Palm Beach, somewhere. But let's fast forward to those. Can you get 24 of the 32 NFL owners to agree that this replay thing was a good idea, with pass interference? Now, we'll see. There's a lot of things that can happen and will happen between now and then. But I'll just say this. I think of all these things that have ever been passed as one-year experiments, more than any of them, because replay back in the 90s and even more recently was passed as a one-year experiment with different things. And in my opinion, this is the one that is the most endangered of those species, that I think after 1 year, this has a good chance to disappear.
Peter King here on the Rich Eisen Show, and the instant replay for pass interference, part of your return to the keyboard that was on NBCSports.com today, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. Okay, the collective bargaining agreement, what do you think here? I mean, this is they got a couple more years left, and I'm sure Roger Goodell would love to present to the fan base to kick off an NFL 100 season a completed collective bargaining agreement. What do you think the odds are of that happening?
Well, Goodell told CNBC recently that it's his hope that there's a new CBA in place before the start of the 2019 season. I think that's an absolute pipe dream. Hey, good for them. But if the NFL is going to have a new deal with the players, their fourth negotiating session between the NFL Management Council and the NFLPA's 10-member executive committee begins on Wednesday of this week. It's a 3-day session. So who knows? They may get serious. But, to this point, there's been nothing major put on the table. We're 7 weeks from the start of the regular season. I don't know how you get a deal of that magnitude done in 7 weeks. I hope it's done so that it's not hanging over the head of the game like a sword of Damocles. But, I was told on Saturday that there has been zero discussion yet of percentage of the gross. That's what this is going to come down to, Rich. We can talk about, what are they going to do with the preseason? What are they going to do with putting a team in London? All these other things. That's all window dressing. The fact is, the biggest thing for the players is going to be, what are you going to do about the percentage of the gross? And I think it was very interesting. The Green Bay Packers last week, basically, issued their earnings report. And basically, their player costs during the average team player costs with salary cap and benefits last year was about $215, $220 million per team. And, the league wrote every team a check for about $275 million last year. So that doesn't even include anything else that is, any local revenue, your local TV or radio revenue, which teams can keep, and all the ticket revenue and things like that. So, look, I think that players, if you start talking about 50, 51, maybe even 52% of the gross, then we're talking about a way that a deal can get done before the start of the season. I doubt sincerely that the owners, until they're kicking and screaming, will ever be dragged to give the players that much, say 51 or 52%.
Well, I mean, there's the issue of an 18-game season that's being thrown out there, Peter. How real is this? Is it something that...
I don't think it's very real at all, Rich, because I was told over the weekend that there are one or two teams, one or two. Those are the exact words that I was told, are interested in this proposal, an 18-game season with players playing a maximum of 16 games. And look, I have made this point for the last 3 or 4 years. The only way I would ever support an 18-game schedule, or the only way I think teams ever should support it, is that the players would play, maybe except for a long snapper or a punter or a kicker, not to demean the physical demands that they have, but they're just not involved in as many plays and as many physical plays as, say, a corner or wide receiver or quarterback. But the only way they'd have a chance is to do it that way. And the reason I just don't see it happening is that, right now, last year, Rich, this was pointed out to me, there were 60 starting quarterback games missed last year. And the number was 111 in 2017. The NFL was deliriously happy with that number, that number of 60, which means that it's about the healthiest the starting quarterbacks have ever gotten through a regular season. Why risk either elongating the season or making the season any different, even if you're going to say that starting quarterbacks can only play 16 games? I just don't think it's a formula the majority of teams in the NFL and owners in the NFL want to fool with right now. And you've got some teams, we know it, that doesn't matter what it is. If they can make them more money, they'll put gorillas out there. They'll put giraffes out there. They don't care. They want the 2 extra weeks on TV. But my point has always been, the NFL is wringing its hands over head trauma and over, concussions. And, if you ever let players play 18 weeks, play 18 games, no matter how many buys you give them or whatever, all that emphasis about head trauma and concern about concussions, it's laughable. It just proves that all they're concerned about is money rather than, the health of their players.
A few more minutes left with Peter King, Football Morning in America column, latest one out here on the Rich Eisen Show. You hit the Melvin Gordon contractual impasse. How do you see that playing out right now?
I don't know. I think lately players have had a lot of willpower when it comes to holdouts. You saw obviously what happened to Le'Veon Bell, and I have no idea deep down. It could be that Melvin Gordon has said, "Hey, I'm going to take this all the way to the wall. If they don't pay me $12 million, $13 million a year guaranteed, I'm not playing." Well, then if he's going to do that, then he's going to have a long time where he's not going to play, and probably the entire year. But, he made a statement over the weekend that basically it's been proven that running backs are so valuable and we can't be replaced, or it's hard to replace us and everything. And I don't know what game he's watching. C.J. Anderson, ran for 300 and something yards, 380 yards in the first 4 weeks, where he came off his couch to replace Todd Gurley and James Conner last year, one of the best backs in the league, replacing Le'Veon Bell. And look, Le'Veon Bell is a special talent. Melvin Gordon is a great talent. I get it. But, if you told the Los Angeles Chargers right now that you're going to war this year with Austin Eckler and C.J. Anderson or whoever else it's going to be behind him, if you told them, I don't think they would. They wouldn't. They want Melvin Gordon, but I don't think they'd be crying about that.
So I started the show, Peter, by saying that if I'm Jerry Jones, I sign Dak and Zeke before the season. Figure out what you could do with Amari Cooper when you have to.
Too.
I mean, because
I would too. But Rich, I think the problem with that, and I mean, everybody. I wrote last year. I said you just have to face facts. You're going to have to pay Dak Prescott $28 to $30 million a year.
Yes,
that's it. You just do. You shouldn't wring your hands about it or say how ridiculous it is. You should just pay him. Your quarterback is going to get paid that much.
Correct.
And if you're going to pay your quarterback, let's say 15% of your salary cap, 14 or 15% on average over the next 5 years. I mean, just go back to when all teams other than New England have won a Super Bowl. The vast majority have won them with quarterbacks making a big chunk of the salary cap. And so I just think it's not that big a deal. Now, Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, that's a tough call. I guess I would pay him, but the road is littered with running backs who got paid, and it wasn't a good idea. Now, Zeke is so young. He still has so much tread on his tire. You say the same thing for Melvin Gordon, but I think Ezekiel Elliott is a better player than Melvin Gordon is.
Well, you've been at it. You've been at it a while, Peter. Has there ever been a contract where you get paid if you're in if you stay at home and you don't leave the house after 9 o'clock at night? Can you put that in a contract for somebody like Ezekiel Elliott? Because that, like that.
Yeah, I know. But you know what you have to do with that contract? You just have to write some insurance policies in that contract. That's all there is to it.
Right.
He's too much of a wild card to I would, the way you do this contract, Rich, is very simple. In my opinion, you say, hey, look, if Ezekiel Elliott, plays 14 or more games in each year of this contract, he's eligible for the following guarantees. And not injury related. He should, because if you get hurt playing football, you deserve to get your money. But in all other ways, if Ezekiel Elliott is not there and not available, you shouldn't have to pay him.
Exactly, because let's be honest as well here, Peter. I mean, what you just said about Melvin Gordon, just tying it all together here, is that you could do without your star. You can make do. You can still. I mean, they were 4-0 without Melvin Gordon last year here in Los Angeles because they were able to cobble it all together defensively, offensively. But you could make the case that Zeke is kind of exempt from that. I mean, he is that difference maker for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they need him. They totally need him.
I think right now I have to just say this. I really, really enjoy watching Le'Veon Bell play. He's a maestro of the running back position. I hope he still is for the Jets. I think he's incredibly fun to watch. So I hope the fans get to see that for several more years. I don't know if you will, but I hope you will. And other than that, as far as a power, versatile running back, Ezekiel Elliott is such a treat to watch, and he is a smart running back. Several times last year, they're trying to run the clock out, and he burrows his way back in, so to make sure that he doesn't go out of bounds. He's smart. He's capable of carrying a team on his shoulders.
Oh, yeah.
He's Earl Campbell, I think, and I really, really like him. But I mean, I just think the Cowboys, and look at the Cowboys, Rich. They've got so many people they have to pay. They've got to pay a receiver. Who are they going to pay at linebacker? What are you going to do with Jalen Smith? I mean, what are you going to? There's just a lot of guys on this team. You've paid DeMarcus Lawrence, and it's been shown over the years that it's very hard to pay 3 to 4 players on your team at the absolute top of their earnings at their position and have enough to be really competitive beyond that. So I understand. I think Jerry would love to pay them all, but I understand why he might drive a very, very hard bargain, he and Stephen Jones, going forward in the next few weeks.
Peter, appreciate the call. Thanks for the call. We'll chat again soon. Really, and
all the best. Hey, Rich, and thanks a lot for giving me a nice week off this summer, and happy 50th birthday.
Thanks, Peter. Same to you. We'll chat. We'll see you in Canton, I assume. That's Peter King, at Peter_King.
For more of The Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live, or download the Rich Eisen Show app.